Well, good afternoon, opera friends. It's good to be back with you. We're on the cusp of another vibrant season of opera at the Harrison Opera House here in Norfolk. And it's my pleasure to be with you once again on Saturday afternoons, uh, telling you what to listen for, giving you my take on the main stage productions of Virginia opera. And as you may have seen, if our marketing folks are doing their job, we're opening with a kind of an unusual double bill. Two short one act operas uh, beginning on September 30th. And it's the first of these that is a little bit on the unusual side. Now, those of you who are devoted opera fans will be familiar with the very traditional double bill of Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana and Leoncavallo's Pagliacci. And that's been a tradition for well over a century, since the 1890s when these two works first appeared. But lately, opera companies and stage directors like to kind of monkey around with that formula and try some different pairings, and that's what we're doing this time. So you're going to get your Pagliacci, but before intermission, we're going to present you with a work that I'm sure you've never heard of, unless you are really a Kurt Weill fan, because this will be Kurt Weill's The Seven Deadly Sins, with a text by that mercurial genius of the 20th century theater, Bertolt Brecht. Now, I want to tell you something. I know that opera audiences can be a little bit conservative, and I know that when it's a question of a 20th century piece that you've never heard of, you're a little reluctant. You're not sure you're going to like it. You're a little afraid that it will have odd, dissonant harmonies and no melody and sound like cats yowling and pots and pans banging. Can I just tell you that's not Kurt Weill? And can I also tell you that in the several months that I have been studying this piece and preparing to teach it in my opera appreciation classes around the Commonwealth, I have become obsessed with the Seven Deadly Sins. I love it. It is fantastic. I now own 8 recordings of this piece, and I never tire of it. The music is brilliant. The characters really take you on a roller coaster journey in the short time. It's about 45 minutes at most. And I can't wait for you to hear it. But let me point out, in the limited time I've got here, gosh, I wish I could talk about it all afternoon, but they've got other programming planned, I understand. So I'll tell you what I can in a short amount of time, and also kind of give you a little refresher course on Pagliacci, a very familiar classic Italian tragedy. What to call this? I think one reason the Seven Deadly Sins isn't so well known is because it's neither fish nor fowl. You know, we like our artworks to be easily categorized. Nutcracker is a ballet, Carmen's an opera, Messiah is an oratorio, but what the heck is the Seven Deadly Sins? Kurt Weill and his publisher called it a ballet chanté, a sung ballet. Well, who sings in a ballet? I mean, we're an opera company, so it must be kind of opera-ish, right? And it is kind of opera-ish, but it's also, it's got one main character who sings. There's another performer who only dances, but it's also a little bit cabaret. It's also a little bit like a cantata, actually. You can do it in a concert version, like a cantata or an oratorio. And it's even a little bit like a song cycle, perhaps like one of Mahler's symphonic song cycles, like Das Lied von der Erde, des Knabens Wunderhorn. So it's not this and it's not that, but it's unique and it is wonderful. Now, here's something interesting. We select these operas, our artistic committee and the board of directors, they select the seasons years in advance, at least a couple of years. And what is this opera about? Let's call it a show, so we don't always just think of it as an opera. What is this theater piece about? It's about actually a homeless family in Louisiana, and they want to earn enough money to build a house. And the youngest member of the family, the daughter, Anna, dances, and so they give her a mandate. The family sends her out to into the big cities of America to find work dancing and entertaining and make enough money so that she can come home and they can build a house. Now stop and think. A show about homeless people in Louisiana? Have you read the headlines lately? What were the odds? It's uncanny that we would be doing a show about homelessness in Louisiana when there are, right now, as you know, tens of thousands of homeless people in Louisiana in the wake of those catastrophic floods in the Baton Rouge area. So if you're going to come and see our show, I'm going to at least make a suggestion that you consider making an equivalent donation, perhaps to a charitable organization that will ease the suffering down there in Louisiana, because there are lots of real life Annas. Anyway, back to the music. There is a prologue. Now, as Anna goes out into the country, they have a plan. She's going to dance for 7 years. I guess they've sat down at the kitchen table and done some figuring, and they figure it'll take her 7 years to earn enough to build a house. And in each of the 7 cities, in each of the 7 years of her journey, Anna is going to be confronted by one of the cardinal sins. And I can rattle these off now that I've been talking about this piece so much all over the state. We have idleness, or also called sloth. We have pride, anger, gluttony, lust, avarice, and envy. And she's going to be confronted by the temptation to indulge in one of these sins in each city and kind of wrestle with that. And Bertolt Brecht, being Bertolt Brecht, he's going to kind of turn the idea of sin and temptation upside down on its head to make an ironic point about about a number of things, mostly about a life devoted to materialism and material gain. But there is a prologue that we have to talk about a little bit, because it establishes some important features of the show. Now, this is written in German, and many of the excerpts you'll hear today are in German. Rest assured, we are going to be performing it in an authorized English translation by the poet W.H. Auden. So in English, in the prologue, Anna is talking to us, and she says, "So my sister and I left Louisiana, where the moon on the Mississippi is a shining ever, like you always hear in the songs of Dixie. We look forward to our homecoming, and the sooner the better." Now, wait a minute. What's this about a sister? Are there 2 of them? All the way through this piece, Anna will talk about she and her sister. She goes on to tell us that her sister is the artistic and pretty one, whereas she, Anna, is the practical and kind of common sense sibling. Well, let me tell you something. There is only one Anna. This show is about duality. Since Anna is going to be tempted by one of the deadly sins in each of her stopovers, think of those cartoons where there's, a little devil on the fellow's left shoulder and a little angel on his right shoulder. You and I have been in that situation where we are wrestling with a moral or ethical choice, and we kind of struggle with it. That's the duality that exists in all human beings. So this is made manifest in the 7 deadly sins by Anna thinking of that other side of her nature as a sister, as another person. And they are represented on stage by a singer and a dancer. The practical, kind of cold-hearted Anna is the singer, and then the kind of artistic, intuitive, more natural, instinctive side of her is the ballet dancer, or the modern dancer, called Anna 2. So we have Anna 1 and Anna 2. Now, let's listen to a little bit of this prologue where, after a very important orchestral introduction, Anna is going to explain some of what I just read in the English translation, and listen to the character of the orchestra. What is the emotional affect? Most young girls, if they're heading out to a big city to become a professional dancer, they're excited, they're ambitious, they can't wait to see their name in lights. But what is Kurt Weill telling us about what Anna is feeling?
als morgen, lieber heute als morgen.
Well, it has the character of a march, but kind of a bluesy march. Not, uh, what I feel is that Anna is a little bit reluctant. She even says out loud, and her sister, that other side of her dual nature, says they'd rather not be doing this. They can't wait till they can come home again. Anna doesn't want to dance for money. She just would rather dance under the moonlight along the bayou there. But her family has given her no choice, so she heads out, and the music is a little bit like a dirge, like a sad little march. Well, let's kind of hear some of the more significant parts of this. Now, one little thing about that prologue. German composers ever since Wagner and even before have enjoyed leading motives, leitmotifs, musical phrases or ideas that represent something, that have a kind of symbolism attached. And that prologue that we just heard, it had a little bit of a clarinet duet. And the very first couple of phrases that you heard contained an important musical idea. You had a downward phrase for two clarinets in harmony, repeated. You heard it once, you heard it again, but there was a difference between the two statements. Here, just listen to that little fragment that you heard right at the beginning. Did you catch the difference? They were identical, except the second one finished lower. There was a higher version and a lower version that ended just a half step below the first one. So what do we have? We have a single musical gesture that's heard in two different manifestations, higher and lower. Meet Anna. That is the musical idea that symbolizes Anna's dual nature. And on every page of this very attractive and compelling score of Kurt Weill's, you will hear not that exact melody, but the idea of two similar musical phrases, one higher and one lower. And that is Anna with the angel and the devil on her shoulder, musically accompanying the performers all the way through this piece. We'll skip to the town of Memphis. Anna gets a job in a cabaret in Memphis. And Anna, too, the artistic side of our heroine, of our protagonist, she would like to do an elegant cabaret. She would like to dance artistically, do a class act. But Anna 1, the vocalist, tells her sister, in quotation marks, she reminds herself that that's not what this audience wants, because it becomes very apparent that far from being an elegant performing venue, Anna is dancing in a cheap nightclub with winos and drunks, and she's being paid, frankly, to take her clothes off. Anna says to her artistic side, she says, don't have your leave your pride at home. We can't afford for you to be proud. So don't be so proud that you hide your bosom and you hide your thighs. Give the people what they want. So already see how the idea of the sin of pride is turned upside down. Anna, throughout this piece, is going to be forced to compromise her better angels, to compromise her high standards and her ideals. For what? In pursuit of the almighty dollar. There is this imperative to earn enough money for a house, and she's got to do whatever it takes. So if she's too proud to debase herself and debauch herself in front of a paying audience, well, that's too bad. That is a temptation that she must resist. And, there's a lot of really attractive, very characteristic Weillian melody in this score. Listen to this charming, elegant, graceful waltz in which the music represents the high artistic aspirations of Anna, the artist, but the words, there's a dissonance between the words, there's a disconnect, because what Anna is singing here is, don't be so proud. The men want to see your naked body, so let's give them that.
War nicht leicht für Anna Kleider und Hüte machen ein Mädchen hoffärtig. Wenn die Tiger trinkend sich im Wasser blicken, werden sie oft gefährlich. Also wollte sie eine Künstlerin sein und wollte Kunst machen in dem Kabarett. In Memphis, der zweiten Stadt unserer Reise. Und das war nicht, was dort die Leute wollen. Was dort die Leute wollen, war das nicht.
A waltz so elegant it could have been written by one of the Strauss family members if they had lived another generation longer. But again, that disconnect, the irony of an elegant tune expressing a debauched, debased reality. Well, Anna travels on to Los Angeles, and we know from Bertolt Brecht's text that she's got a job as an extra on a film set. And here she'll be confronted by the temptation of the sin of anger. And Anna 1 is going to tell Anna 2, remember the Bible, the good book tells us, resist not evil. So don't be so angry all the time because, you know, Mr. Big here on the film set, he won't like it. We'll be out on our little tushes and we'll be fired and we have to be employed to make money. And what is Anna 2 angry about? What has roused her anger? What is tempting her? Because she has seen injustice in this project, this film that's being made. Now, what's the injustice? Bertolt Brecht doesn't express it. I know from research that in the original production in 1933 in Paris, that was staged by the great Georges Balanchine, that Anna saw animals being abused. But it doesn't mention that specifically, so it could be anything. We'll have to see how it's staged here at Virginia Opera. It could be minorities being mistreated. It could be women not being treated equally, whatever the director would like to do. But Anna has seen something wrong, and it makes her angry, and she wants to protest. She wants to do something about it. Well, in that context, is anger really a sin? I mean, don't we read in the New Testament that Jesus was angered when he saw the money changers in the temple? When you see something terrible being happened, you're supposed to do something about it. You're supposed to protest. But again, Anna 1, the practical, shrewd, kind of cold-hearted, materialistic side of Anna says, no, that's bad. Don't be angry. Just go about your business. It's not your problem. So once again, by degrees, she is compromising all of her values. Here's a little bit of ballet music from this Los Angeles movement, and you'll hear this is very clever writing. You'll hear an orchestral passage that sounds very harsh and rigorous, that sounds angry. That's Anna 2. And then it will toggle back and forth between that and what sounds like some vintage 1920s era Hollywood dance music. Would this be a foxtrot? I'm not sure, but back and forth, Anna, angry Anna, watching frivolous and unjust filmmaking procedures there in Hollywood. That type of, what was that, a foxtrot? I'm not sure, but that evocation of old-time Hollywood entertainment music. Kurt Weill had done something like this before. 2 years earlier in his full-length opera, The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni, also with a text by Brecht, and Mahagoni being a fictional American city in which there's a frivolous lifestyle of prostitutes and showgirls and dancing and whiskey and gambling. There was another similar bit of that type of dance music. And I think he may have, in the Seven Deadly Sins, been kind of tipping his hat and urging his audience to remember that similar episode from Mahagoni, which sounded like this. And I will just point out that both of those excerpts contained a dotted rhythm, doot-de-doot-de-doot-de-doot-de-doo, which we also heard in the prologue in that desultory, sad, reluctant march tune, and we will hear it again towards the end of this particular piece. Now, when Anna sings there in Los Angeles, telling her sister, "Cool it with your anger, we can't afford for you to be angry, Mr. Big won't like it and we'll be fired," again, it's to a very memorable tune, a real bit of ear candy, something that you could, well, I tell you, I get this stuck in my head sometimes, one of those earworms, because it's extremely catchy. But interestingly, I think that Kurt Weill is trying to conjure up a melodic style that will sound American. See what you think.
Wer dem Unrecht in den Arm fällt, den will man nirgendwo haben. Und wer über die Rohheit in Zorn gerät, der lasse sich gleich begraben. Wer keine Gemeinheit duldet, wie soll der geduldet werden? Wer da nichts verschuldet, der sühnt auf Erden.
Why does that sound American? There's just something upbeat about it, and it has this forthright, optimistic rhythm that really sounds. It's not difficult to believe that Kurt Weill, after he emigrated to America, would become a leading composer for the Broadway stage, writing such shows as Street Scene and Lady in the Dark and so forth. As a matter of fact, that tune you just heard, dee da dum da 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 dum. The first time I heard it, I thought, where have I heard a melody that's like that before? It sounds so familiar. And then I thought of what it might be.
My boy Bill, I will see that he's named after me. I will. My boy Bill, he'll be tall and as tough as a tree.
Yeah, I think that, Carousel came 12 years after the Seven Deadly Sins, but I think we can see that it would be an easy metamorphosis for Kurt Weill to become a thoroughly American composer for the Broadway stage. Well, there's a lot of whimsy in this piece that I don't have time to show you, a lot of humorous passages, especially sung by that male quartet that represents her family back home in Louisiana. But as we get closer to the climax of this piece, things start turning more and more tragic. There's a greater degree of pathos as Anna loses piece by piece more and more of her soul, more and more of the natural virtue that she had as a young girl in Louisiana. Because we come now to the movement in Boston that is called lust. And what is the term, what does the sin of lust consist of in this context? Well, Anna has become a kept woman, and money and jewels are being showered on her by a wealthy millionaire. Makes us think of Violetta Valéry in La Traviata, Verdi's classic. And just like Violetta, Anna has fallen in love with a poor man, and she's lavishing money on him. And that's the Anna 2 side of Anna's nature, the artistic one with high aspirations. So Anna 1 says, no, 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 you can't do this. You have to resist lust, which actually is just true love. And she says, you've got to break it up with this fella. We just can't afford it. Girls like us, you have to remember which side your bread is buttered on. So Anna, for the sake, again, of material gain, for the sake of being able to have the American dream of a house, has to give up her one shot at true love and at happiness. And it's killing her. And when she sings about this tough choice she has to make, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is heart-wrenching. And by the way, I'm not always pointing out where we have that higher and lower leitmotif, but you'll hear it in the first two phrases of this absolutely stirring solo from the Boston movement.
Ach, ich sagte ihr oft ohne Treue, bist du höchstens die Hälfte wert. Man bezahlt nicht für solche Säue, sondern nur für das, was man verehrt. Das kann höchstens eine machen, die auf niemand angewiesen ist. Eine andere hat nichts zu lachen, wenn sie einmal ihre Situation vergisst. Ihm sagte ich, setz dich nicht zwischen zwei.
Now, did you hear that? What I was talking about, that similar phrase presented in two different versions at the very beginning. Dee-da-dum, da-da-dum, dee-da-dum, dum. One musical gesture presented first higher, then first lower. Now, when I was researching this piece, it's about lust. I remembered that in the Threepenny Opera, there's also a song by Kurt Weill about lust. It's called the Barbara Song. And I figured, okay, I'm going to do my due diligence here. I better go back and refresh my memory about the Barbara Song. Just, they're 5 years apart from 1928 to 1933. Let's see how the composer treated the same topic of lust 5 years apart. So I listened to the Barbara Song, and it blew my mind. Now, listen to this little fragment from the Threepenny Opera. This is the song about lust.
Ja, da kann man sich doch nicht nur hinlegen. Ja, da muss man kalt und herzlos sein. Ja, da könnte.
All right, now, with that in your ear, listen to this fragment from the middle section of Anna's Lust solo.
Das kann höchstens eine machen, die auf niemand.
He quoted himself. Two very similar phrases. He went back and quoted the Barbara Song in the middle section of the Seven Deadly Sins. And could he have expected the audience to recognize that? Was it deliberate? Yes, you have to understand that the Threepenny Opera is one of the most successful and popular theater shows ever created. It was still playing to sold-out houses all over the world. Within 1 year of the premiere of the Threepenny Opera, it had been performed 4,000 times and been translated into several languages. So, of course, the Threepenny Opera I would compare to the musical Hamilton that's sweeping the world today. Everybody knew those numbers. So now, here's the thing that really blows my mind about it. Let me sing that little motive from the Threepenny Opera. Dee-da-da-da. And here's how it's presented in the Seven Deadly Sins. Dee-da-da-da-da. Higher, lower, and higher. Once again, we have a motive that's presented lower and higher, but this time it's 5 years apart. So not only did the first melody in this section have an immediate version of our duality motif, but in the other melody, in the contrasting melody, he creates the duality motif from one lust song to another over a span of 5 years. Wow. Well, we're going to skip ahead to the final city, the final temptation. She's resisted gluttony. She's starved herself rather than eat when she's hungry. She's had to deal with avarice. And now we're going to be envious. In San Francisco, now that she lost her chance at true love in Boston, something has died within Anna, and she even says, Anna, my sister Anna is so tired, and she's envious of everyone else. Who is she envious of? Well, she's envious of people who can express anger when they see injustice. She's envious of people who can be true to their true loves. She's envious of people who can eat when they're hungry, who can take what they need without feeling guilty, of those bad people, because in Anna's rationalization, all those people who are true to their loves, who eat when they're hungry, who don't debase themselves for pay, those are the sinners. They gave into those sins of anger and gluttony. Whereas Anna, she tells her sister, you and I, we are the victors. We are the good ones. Those other people, the good book says they will be punished. They'll be sorry. But not you and me. We come home in triumph because we stayed on the true and the straight and narrow path. So this final section, there is just a hair-raising but false triumphant march. Anna comes home trying to convince herself that she has done the right thing, that she held to the course of virtue because that resulted in enough money to buy a house. And all those other people, those people who lead lives as they choose, they are the sinners. Well, as Shakespeare once said, methinks she doth protest too much. But my goodness, what a compelling and hair-raising, triumphant march this is.
Aber wohin sie gehen, das wissen sie nicht. Schwester, folg mir und verzicht auf die Freuden, nach denen es dich wie die anderen verlangt. Ach, überlass sie den törichten Leuten, denen ist nicht, denen ist nicht vor dem Ende bangt. Iss nicht und trink nicht und sei nicht träge, die Strafe bedenk, die auf Liebe steht. Bedenk, was geschieht, wenn du tätst, was dir läge. Nütze sie nicht, nütze die Jugend nicht, denn sie vergeht. Schwester von mir, du wirst sehen am Ende, gehst im Triumph du vor allem hervor. Sie aber stehen noch schreckliche Wunde, zitternd im Nichts, zitternd im Nichts, vor verschlossenem
And right at the end there, her family back in Louisiana welcoming her home with open arms, praising the Lord that he kept her on the straight and narrow path. Heavy irony from the pen of Bertolt Brecht, who was trying to point out that in pursuing the dream of owning one's own home, that sometimes people distort values in pursuit of that kind of material success. Hey, haven't you seen a young couple that perhaps bought a bigger house than they should and got a ball and chain of a mortgage and were house poor? And, sometimes those things that we pursue, sometimes they can be traps if we're not very careful. We have to be careful about pursuit of the almighty dollar and material gain. Well, when Anna is back home, there is an epilogue in which Anna 1 tells Anna 2, well, we did it, sister. We're here. We earned the money, and we're back in Mississippi, back home, and there's that house. We did it, didn't we? And here's where I think, Bertolt Brecht did not care for the way that Kurt Weill set this text, or frankly, the way he set any of his texts, because Bertolt Brecht had a much more cynical take on this situation. He wanted us to look down on Anna. He wanted to portray Anna as a cold, material girl who made bad choices, and that we should kind of scorn her for the way that she conducted herself. But listen to how Kurt Weill sets these words, how empty and desolate and how full of despair Anna is, because her soul is broken by the choices that she made, by the pursuit of a materialistic success. It's heartbreaking.
Darauf kehrten wir zurück nach Louisiana, wo die Wasser des Mississippi unter Monde fließen. 7 Jahre waren wir in den Städten, unser Glück zu versuchen. Jetzt haben wir's geschafft. Jetzt steht es da, unser kleines Haus Louisiana. Jetzt kehren wir zurück in unser kleines Haus am Mississippi-Fluss in Louisiana. Nicht wahr, Anna? Ja, Anna.
It's the triumph of Anna I, but it's the defeat and ruin of the artistic, idealistic Anna II. And it's that point of view that Kurt Weill's music directs us to make us empathize with the heartbreak of Anna. So I hope you're a little bit more intrigued about this piece than perhaps you were when it was an unfamiliar title. I promise you're going to find it very compelling and moving. But we have another opera. How about that? So we will pivot from an unfamiliar opera to one of the most iconic of Italian operas, or any opera from any culture in any period. Pagliacci of Leoncavallo, an opera that has managed to cross over into popular culture. That Vesti la Giubba that Canio sings is something that, well, you know, it was a vintage Rice Krispies commercial. Those of you of a certain generation will recall. And right at the outset, there's one of those $50 technical terms about opera that you find in books and encyclopedias that we need to deal with. And I'm thinking of the word verismo, because that's a whole school of opera that happened around the 1890s. It was also sometimes called La Nuova Scuola, the new school of Italian opera. What do we mean by verismo? Verismo simply means truth. It's the Italian word for truth. And the composers like Mascagni, who wrote Cavalleria Rusticana, the traditional double bill partner for Pagliacci, they felt that they needed to change the storytelling style to be more realistic and more truthful than perhaps the old-fashioned operas of Verdi and Rossini, Donizetti, Bellini. What do they mean by this? Well, I can give you a good example. We're going to listen to a portion of the love duet in the middle of Pagliacci. Now, love duets are often our favorite moments in Italian operas because it's there that the music kind of soars, takes wings, is ardent, is passionate, is just so juicy. Who doesn't love a beautiful love duet? And there's a good one in Pagliacci. This is as ardent as you could wish for. Just get a load of some of this.
E allora perché dite m'hai stregato, se vuoi lasciarmi senza pietà, quel bacio tuo, perché me l'hai dato, fra spasmi ardenti di voluttà. Se tu scordasti l'ore fugaci, io non lo posso e voglio ancor quei spasmi ardenti, quei caldi baci e tanta febbre, ma me sai ricor.
Okay, compose yourself. Stop gasping at the sheer beauty of the voices and the music. It's soaring, it's ardent. What makes it verismo? It's wrong. Uh, in old fashioned opera, when people sang of their true love, it was honorable. They were soulmates. It was appropriate for them to be in love. Here we have adultery in action, adultery right in front of your eyes, because that was Nedda, the wife, the young wife of the head clown of the troupe of clowns in Pagliacci, Canio, and she's cheating on him. That was a young buck from the village in which they're performing that evening show named Silvio. In a verismo opera, when there is love music, there will be something foul about it, something immoral, something wrong, something adulterous, something wrong at the core of it. And what the composers were saying is, we're tired of love duets between true lovers who are going to be faithful unto death. Why are the women in Italian operas so darn virtuous all the time? They're as pure as the driven snow. Take Desdemona in Verdi's adaptation of Shakespeare's Othello. She is suspected by her husband of being unfaithful, but of course, because it's an old-fashioned opera, he's mistaken. She was true to him, and so when he's jealous of, when Othello is jealous of Desdemona, it's a tragic mistake. In a verismo opera, if you suspect that your wife is cheating on you behind your back, well, of course she is. What are you, stupid? They're saying, let's tell the truth about life. Adultery happens. Not everybody is as pure as the driven snow. So that's one of the things. And then the other aspect of verismo is that you have to tell stories about kings and queens and dukes and duchesses or gods and goddesses. Why can't you have tragedies about common folk, about peasants, about the janitor, the guy who takes out the garbage, or in this case, clowns? So telling tragic stories about people who in former times were thought not to matter and portraying them warts and all. Not everybody's virtuous. Not all tenors are heroic. There are no heroes in Pagliacci, trust me. Now, this opera was Leoncavallo's first opera. He was a young man with a doctorate of music in his pocket from a fine conservatory. He wanted to be a famous composer, and boy, did he hit it rich with the first one. It was successful from the beginning, and it is extremely effective, and it will be performed as long as opera survives. Now, the funny thing is, he was like a rock band who had one hit single and never went gold or platinum again. He wrote several other operas. He wrote one called Zaza that Virginia Opera will never stage because it's just not of enough quality. He wrote La Boheme. No, you're thinking, Puccini wrote La Boheme. Well, I didn't say he wrote the La Boheme. He wrote a La Boheme, and it pales in comparison to Puccini's masterpiece. He wrote a lot of operas. None of them were ever successful again. What went wrong? And why, if those were so mediocre, why is Pagliacci so good? how did he hit on a formula that he was unable to recapture in the rest of his life? Well, I have a theory about it, and I'll quickly share it with you here. I think that young Leoncavallo looked at some of his favorite operas, some of the great operas that were sweeping Europe in the 19th century, and I think, just as we sometimes do at a laptop, he kind of cut and pasted effects and formulas and devices from some of these other operas and sort of applied them to this libretto that he wrote himself about a love affair that turns into murder. And I mentioned Otello. I think really, even though Leoncavallo claimed that the story of Pagliacci was derived from a murder trial that happened when he was a boy, in which his father was the magistrate that ruled on the guilt of the murderers, I really think that the characters and the plot outline comes from Verdi's Otello. Canio is the older man married to a young, beautiful woman. He is Otello. Like Otello, he has a pathological character flaw of jealousy. Nedda is his Desdemona, except that she's kind of the Verismo Desdemona in that Nedda really does commit adultery. The villain in Shakespeare and Verdi, Iago, is the correlation there is with Tonio, one of the other clowns. And just as Iago wants revenge and wants to ruin the marriage of Otello and Desdemona by planting the seed of doubt in Otello's mind, so does Tonio do that. Tonio is the one who comes up to Canio and lets him know that his wife is not being as faithful as he believes. Now, that not only that plot device, but a little bit of the musical characterization of the two villains is very similar. Listen to a little bit of Otello now, and we're going to hear the moment when Iago is planting the seed of doubt in Otello's mind that his wife may not be as faithful as he believed. And the thing about Iago is he's not an old-fashioned, mustache-twirling, cackling villain. He seems like a nice guy. He has this benign exterior. He seems like the sweetest man in the world. And notice how his warning to Otello is very conversational and low-key and passive. Now, in comparison, here is Tonio, who has observed Nedda canoodling with the village boy Silvio, and comes to report what he has seen to Canio. Notice how, it is conversational, low-key. Tonio is pretending to be Canio's friend, even though he has a revenge-inspired plot that he's weaving.
Io la sorveglio, ora facciam la recita, chissà che lì non venga lo spettacolo e si tradisca. Or via, bisogna fingere per
extremely similar. I think that Iago is clearly the ancestor, the inspiration for Tonio. Now, in both cases, the jealous husbands are devastated and heartbroken, and both Otello and Canio will have a monologue in which they are alone on stage and just hemorrhaging grief and asking God why and venting their rage and disappointment and heartbreak. Now, before you hear the very iconic aria in which Canio does all of that, first listen to Otello's grief-stricken monologue, Dio mi potevi scegliere. Now, here is the Verismo uh, version of that monologue, the very famous conclusion to Canio's Vesti la Giubba.
Bravo, Pagliacci, lo spazio ed il pianto, in ora scorge il signoggio del dolor.
So we can see the DNA of Verdi and Shakespeare present in Leoncavallo, with a lot of models from Otello being applied to Pagliacci. But that's not the only model that he had in mind. This opera is kind of a crazy quilt of devices borrowed and done so with great skill and great musicianship by Leoncavallo from other composers. So now I think he also had Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana in mind, the one that wound up being the traditional partner on double bills for over a century. One of Mascagni's devices in Cavalleria was to interrupt the action with an orchestral intermezzo instead of an intermission. Well, Leoncavallo did the same thing. And not only does he borrow the device of an intermezzo, but the structure and nature of the two intermezzi are virtually identical. Now, here's the beginning of Mascagni's intermezzo from Cavalleria. Notice the soft choir of strings just exuding pathos. Now compare that with the very beginning of the Pagliacci intermezzo. And back to the Cavalleria intermezzo, which builds up to a climax of throbbing, pulsating passion. And how do you think the Pagliacci intermezzo will end? A climax of throbbing, pulsating passion. And following that intermezzo comes one of the dramatic devices that really makes this opera click, and that is the play within a play machine. The clowns are going to give their show. You know, this is based on the model of the traditional Italian form of entertainment, the Commedia dell'arte, a troupe of jugglers, acrobats, actors, musicians, and clowns that would tour the countryside, stopping in each village, setting up their simple stage and improvising a show that was pretty much always the same, usually about a cuckolded husband, because in Italian culture, nothing is funnier than a cuckolded husband. It never stops being funny. So, of course, here we have art imitating life. Canio is going to play the cuckolded husband. Nedda is going to play the role of the unfaithful wife. And the irony is that it's not just happening in the script, it's happening on stage. And Canio is going to get more and more carried away by the reality of it. And the audience out there, the chorus, playing the audience members, they're going to be saying, wow, this is really a better show than last year. They've really practiced. The acting is so good. And the reason this is effective drama is because it does what the writers of drama always try to do. It makes you and I in the audience omniscient. It gives us a godlike knowledge that is lacked by all the other characters. No one on stage knows what's going to happen. They don't understand that the show is imitating what's really happening, off stage. But we do. We have information that none of the other characters have. So we feel powerful, we feel godlike, and it makes us more invested in what's going to happen because we understand the stakes and the risks. And we're sort of lulled into a false sense of security. The clown show is actually pretty funny. There are a lot of sight gags. There's a shtick with a rubber chicken that Colombina, played by Nedda, is making for her lover, Arlecchino. It's actually pretty funny stuff, and it lulls us into a false sense of security, as does the comic nature of the music that is the underscoring. There's something inherently comic about that theme with its little boom. I think it's describing maybe what happens when clowns step on a banana peel, right? It sounds like the slip and the fall. I think that some Hollywood composers maybe had the Pagliacci comic music in mind when they came up with this. And there's your ring, boom. And remember, Dick Van Dyke fell over the ottoman as he came home from work. Slapstick. Well, that's the kind of slapstick you've got going here. But pretty soon, it turns not so funny. And there's a moment when Canio rips off his wig and rips off his costume and says, "No, pagliaccio non son. I'm not a clown. This is real." Because Nedda / Colombina is refusing to give the name of her lover. And Canio, who is driven crazy by a mixture of too much wine and too much grief and anger, berates his wife for real in front of the unsuspecting crowd, saying, "I took you in, I gave you a home, and this is how you repay me." And folks, this is why tenors want to sing this role and always will.
Alberga sol nell'alma tua decletta, tu viscera non hai, solleggia il senso a te. Ma non meriti il mio col, come tristi a vita, e volle lo sprezzo mio cacciarti sol.
Segni
things are coming to a head. We're reaching the boiling point. And at the climax of this opera, once again, Leoncavallo reaches into opera history back to 1868, and he provides Nedda with a moment that is modeled after Carmen. I'm going to play you a little, just about 20 seconds of the final duet between Carmen and Don José. And in that scene in which Carmen is going to meet a violent death, Don José, her jilted former lover, has a knife at her throat. She's dumped him for, of course, the bullfighter Escamillo, and Don José is having none of it, and he corners her outside the bull ring in Seville, and with a knife at her throat says, "Tell me that you love me, tell me that you'll run off with me, or I will kill you where you stand." And because of the defiant, freedom-loving nature of this gypsy woman, she spits in his face and says, "I will do no such thing. I don't care. Go ahead and kill me if you're going to, but I will never say that I love you," in a vocally compelling and a thrilling moment of opera. Now compare that with Nedda's final moments with a knife at her throat. "Tell me the name of your lover." And she says, "I will never tell you the name of my lover. I don't care if it means my death." And she has an extremely similar vocal moment. So with clear models from Otello, from Cavalleria Rusticana, from Carmen, and actually, I didn't have time to tell you about it, but there's actually a quote from Tristan und Isolde in Silvio and Nedda's love duet. What am I saying about this opera? Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not saying it's no good. Oh, well, Glen Winters thinks it's bad because he used other composers' ideas. That's not unusual in a young composer writing his first opera. You know, the young Mozart modeled everything he wrote after Johann Christian Bach. And Verdi's early operas didn't sound like Aida. They sounded like classic bel canto. You have to find your voice. What I'm saying is that the tragic thing about Leoncavallo is that there was no growth afterwards, because you cannot keep going to the well of borrowing other composers' devices and inspirations. You have to find your voice. It turns out that Leoncavallo's voice was not as interesting as that first great masterwork that just poured out of him in youthful enthusiasm, one which, as I say, will always be played as long as people love opera, Pagliacci. So here's our double bill. Something that we know you're going to like, and something that we want you to fall in love with, as we have, Kurt Weill's Seven Deadly Sins. This is going to be the most fun opening night we've had in many seasons. I look for you there. I'll see you at the opera.